On March 31st, 2026, a Japanese YouTuber made a post that seemed like just another dark online joke. It seems that the average lifespan for alcohol dependency is around 50 years old. Have I already passed the halfway mark? At the time, most people didn't think too deeply about the comment, because that kind of humour had become completely normal on her account over the last few years. By that point, her entire online identity had slowly become built around chaotic humour, heavy drinking, emotional oversharing, and a kind of strangely comforting self-destruction that many viewers found painfully relatable. She regularly joked about blacking out after drinking too much, ruining her health, making bad decisions, and struggling to control her habits. But for hundreds of thousands of viewers, that honesty was exactly what made her feel different from most internet personalities. She did not come across as polished, carefully managed, or corporate, in the way many influencers often can. Instead, she felt exhausted, awkward, emotionally drained, and increasingly honest about how difficult life actually felt. And for many people watching her videos late at night, that exhaustion started feeling deeply familiar. Then just days later, a message suddenly appeared across her social media accounts, announcing that she had passed away unexpectedly. So, had everybody been watching somebody slowly collapse in real time without fully realizing it? Or were obsessive fans in some way involved? This story is not really just about one influencer or one tragic internet personality. It is about something much larger that now exists across huge parts of online culture: loneliness and burnout. The pressure of turning your worst habits into your public identity, and what happens when the internet starts rewarding somebody for publicly falling apart. Not all horrors need a bad man lurking in the shadows. Sometimes the horrors of modern life itself are enough.
By the way, this is Dark Case and you can call me Jack. And once again I've gone outside and my nose is just completely blocked up. Annoying. Dark Case Documentaries is now a daily channel, so make sure that you are subscribed and make sure that you interact and watch as many videos as you like, because that means I'll keep on getting recommended to you. As always, thank you so much to all channel members. I'm just waiting for the statistics to update, but we might have made it to 300 channel members before the end of May. I'll just have to wait until tomorrow to find out. Now for today's silly little question. If you could invent one thing with no restrictions whatsoever, what would it be? And why would you invent it? Let me know down in the comments. But now, on with the video.
Long before hundreds of thousands of people knew her online as Zepa, she was simply another young person in Japan, trying to build a stable future and figure out what kind of life she wanted for herself. Originally, she had hoped to become a civil servant, which in Japan is often viewed as one of the safest and most respected career paths a person can pursue, because it offers stability, predictable income, long-term security, and the kind of structured future many young people are encouraged to aim for from an early age. But according to Zepa's own accounts online, she failed the second stage of the examination process required to enter that world, and afterward her life began moving in a very different direction. Following that disappointment, she found work through an agency, but according to her later descriptions, the company quickly turned out to be what many people in Japan refer to as a black company, a term commonly used for businesses known for exploitative working conditions, excessive overtime, emotional pressure from management, and environments where young employees often burn out extremely quickly. In recent years, black companies have become heavily associated with growing dissatisfaction among younger workers in Japan, particularly people who feel trapped between financial pressure, social expectations, and working cultures that often seem emotionally exhausting. Zepa reportedly did not remain there for very long. After leaving, she briefly worked another contract job before quitting after only around a week, and at that point, her future increasingly appeared uncertain. That uncertainty also seemed to affect her emotionally, in ways she would later discuss very openly online. During later videos and posts, she described periods of depression during university and explained how losing structure in her daily life had caused her mental health to spiral downward. School activities had once kept her focused, busy, distracted, and constantly moving forward. But once that structure disappeared, she reportedly found herself spending far more time isolated with her own thoughts. At the same time, another pressure quietly existed in the background of her life, that crushing pressure of comparison. According to Zepa, she was one of triplets, and while her own future felt increasingly unstable, her siblings appeared to be following far more traditional and successful paths through adulthood. Her sister reportedly worked a normal office job, while her brother became a pilot, and together they represented the kind of stable future that Zepa herself seemed to feel increasingly disconnected from. That feeling of disconnection would eventually become one of the most important parts of her online identity, because when people later discovered her videos, many viewers were not simply watching an entertaining internet personality trying to make people laugh. They were watching somebody who openly seemed lost, emotionally exhausted, and uncertain about where life was heading. And for a growing number of young people online, that felt painfully relatable. In April 2022, Zepa uploaded her very first YouTube video, and at the time, almost nobody was paying attention to what she was doing online. In one early upload, she excitedly talked about gaining just 2 subscribers and reaching around 20 views, and there was absolutely no indication yet that she would eventually build an audience of more than 1 million followers across multiple social media platforms. Part of what made those early videos feel so unusual was how directionless and unpolished they seemed, compared to most internet content at the time. She was unemployed, drinking frequently, openly talking about awkward moments in her life, discussing mental health struggles, and sometimes simply rambling casually about everyday experiences, with almost no structure at all. But strangely, that lack of polish slowly became the entire appeal. While huge parts of the internet were becoming increasingly performative, over-edited, and carefully managed, Zepa felt completely unfiltered in a way that audiences found refreshing. She felt messy, she felt human, and with that she felt emotionally honest. And viewers connected with that almost immediately. She also stood out because of the strange contrast between her appearance and the way she actually behaved on camera. Based purely on how she looked, many viewers expected her to act like a stereotypical cute internet personality, with a soft voice, exaggerated reactions, and highly energetic behavior. Instead, she spoke in a much calmer, more awkward, and almost emotionally detached way that felt unusually natural for somebody building an online audience. Her voice was lower than many people expected, her delivery felt understated, and the entire atmosphere of her videos gave the impression that viewers were watching a real person rather than somebody carefully performing a character for attention. Ironically, that contrast became so noticeable that rumors eventually started spreading online, accusing her of secretly being male. Eventually, Zepa addressed the speculation directly and publicly confirmed that she was female. But by that point, people were already becoming deeply attached to her personality and the strange atmosphere surrounding her content. At the same time, another part of her identity was becoming impossible to separate from the channel itself: alcohol. More specifically, Strong Zero, a high-alcohol convenience store drink that had already developed a notorious reputation online throughout Japan for being associated with emotional burnout, chaotic nights out, loneliness, and people trying to temporarily disconnect from reality as cheaply as possible. Entire online communities had formed around Strong Zero culture over the years, with people sharing memes, stories, jokes, and photographs connected to drinking too much and spiraling emotionally late at night. And somehow Zepa became almost perfectly associated with that exact world. She drank during streams, drank in videos, talked about alcohol constantly. Sometimes she seemed to joke about it. Other times she sounded genuinely worried. And over time, the line between those two things slowly became harder for viewers to identify. What made the situation more complicated was that she never fully presented drinking as glamorous or aspirational in the way some others might. In fact, one of her biggest videos was actually about overcoming an aversion to alcohol, and during that discussion she openly admitted that some people simply should not drink at all. That honesty made viewers trust her even more, because she did not come across as somebody trying to sell a fantasy lifestyle or convince audiences that her behavior was healthy. Instead, she came across as somebody simply trying to survive life one day at a time. And for many viewers, especially younger people struggling with work, isolation, anxiety, burnout, or depression, that honesty felt deeply comforting, and the internet started rewarding her for being emotionally transparent in ways that rapidly changed her life. The channel grew quickly. Collaborations followed, subscriber numbers exploded, and slowly the awkward unemployed girl, celebrating 20 views, became one of the most recognizable personalities within that corner of Japanese internet culture. But hidden underneath that growth was a contradiction that would later become increasingly disturbing to look back on, because many of the same behaviors making audiences feel emotionally connected to her were also the same behaviors that appeared to be doing her harm. As Zepa's popularity continued growing online, the drinking gradually stopped feeling like a side detail within her content, and instead became one of the defining parts of her entire public identity. Fans began referring to her with names like the Queen of Strong Zero, and in many ways that nickname perfectly captured the strangeness surrounding her online presence, because her content increasingly existed somewhere between comedy, loneliness, emotional exhaustion, and quiet self-destruction. Sometimes her posts were genuinely funny, other times they felt deeply uncomfortable, and increasingly viewers struggled to tell the difference between those two things. Over time, Zepa became far more open about the reality of her drinking habits online. She joked about blacking out after drinking too much, posted about drinking through the night, and openly talked about feeling unable to sleep without alcohol. In one post, she admitted that she rarely had alcohol-free days at all, and explained that if she did not drink before bed, it no longer felt like the day was properly complete. At another point, she described drinking heavily until 7 in the morning, before immediately continuing to drink again afterward. And while many viewers responded to those comments with humour and memes, others were becoming genuinely worried about what they were watching happen in real time. There was something unusually self-aware about the way she discussed her behaviour. This was not somebody pretending everything was completely fine. She openly talked about alcohol-related depression. She openly admitted she was becoming worried about herself. At one point, she even posted photographs showing bruises on her arms, which she associated with drinking-related incidents. And gradually, this created a very uncomfortable situation online. The more openly she struggled, the more emotionally connected that people seemed to become to her. That is one of the darkest contradictions inside modern internet culture. Audiences constantly say they want creators to be authentic, emotionally honest, vulnerable, and imperfect, rather than fake or overly manufactured. But at the same time, the internet also has a habit of rewarding visible suffering in ways people do not always recognize immediately, especially when that suffering becomes entertaining to watch. And in Zepa's case, the line between sharing her life and performing her decline slowly became blurred over time, not necessarily intentionally, but algorithmically, emotionally, and of course financially, because every post about drinking generated attention, every chaotic livestream became a top performer, every emotional confession strengthened the parasocial relationship between creator and audience. People felt protective of her, whilst also being comforted by her and deeply emotionally attached. Some viewers even described her videos as helping them survive difficult periods in their own lives. And that is what makes this story feel so uncomfortable in hindsight. The audience was not simply mocking her or treating her suffering like it was a joke. Many viewers genuinely cared about her as a person, but at the same time, the internet ecosystem surrounding her still continued rewarding the exact behavior people were becoming increasingly worried about. The drinking remained central to the content, the chaos remained entertaining, and the algorithm never really distinguishes between somebody thriving and somebody quietly falling apart. One of the reasons Zepa's story feels so unsettling in hindsight is because she never seemed completely unaware of what was happening to her. In fact, at times she sounded painfully aware. As her audience continued growing larger, she began speaking more openly about her discomfort with fame itself and the strange reality of becoming known primarily for chaos, drinking, and emotional oversharing online. Despite building an audience of hundreds of thousands of people, Zepa later admitted that she had never originally intended to become a lifelong YouTuber or internet personality. More importantly, she specifically said that she did not want to become what she described as an aging alcoholic internet personality. That single comment completely changes the way that I look back at her content, because suddenly the jokes about drinking stop feeling random or silly, the exhaustion stops feeling accidental or quirky, and the internet persona itself begins looking less like a fun character and more like something she may have slowly become trapped inside. By that point, Zepa's identity online had become incredibly specific in the minds of viewers. She was the chaotic strong zero girl, the awkward late-night streamer, the self-aware alcoholic, the emotionally unstable but strangely comforting internet friend who always seemed brutally honest about how difficult life could feel. Internet audiences often become deeply attached to consistency, especially when a creator feels emotionally real rather than carefully manufactured. The more authentic somebody appears online, the more audiences often resist seeing them change. That creates a very difficult situation for creators whose popularity becomes heavily tied to visible dysfunction, emotional instability, or unhealthy mechanisms for coping. Because if the chaos disappears, audiences sometimes stop paying attention. And when audiences do disappear, creators can suddenly lose the very thing that gave them emotional validation, financial stability, and purpose in the first place. That contradiction exists underneath huge parts of modern influencer culture, particularly for creators whose popularity comes from emotional openness, rather than carefully controlled branding. Over time, Zepa also admitted that she was uncomfortable with how large her audience had become. According to her own comments, she preferred smaller communities and more grounded interactions, rather than mainstream internet fame. Eventually, uploads on her main channel slowed down significantly, but she never fully disappeared from the internet. She remained active online, continued posting across platforms, streamed regularly, and kept sharing pieces of her life with audiences who had become emotionally attached to her over the years. And that is another important part of this story, because from the outside, internet fame often looks like an amazing escape. Escape from terrible jobs, escape from financial pressure, escape from loneliness and uncertainty. And in many ways, YouTube genuinely did transform Zepa's life. Before the channel, she appeared deeply uncertain about her future and increasingly disconnected from a traditional lifestyle. Afterward, she had money, recognition, community, and millions of people who genuinely, in a way, cared about her. But at the same time, the internet had also transformed many of her lowest moments into content. And once audiences emotionally connect to a specific version of somebody, escaping that version can become incredibly difficult, especially when the internet rewards consistency far more than recovery. In some ways, Zepa had escaped one kind of misery, but then accidentally monetized another. By early 2026, parts of Zepa's online presence had started feeling noticeably darker to many people watching her content. Not dramatically darker in one obvious moment though, more like a slow accumulation of increasingly uncomfortable warning signs spread across weeks and months. There were posts about dependency, posts about exhaustion, posts about drinking too much, posts about regretting the previous night. At one point, she openly admitted that she was becoming worried about herself. In another post, she discussed alcohol-related depression in a way that felt unusually direct and emotionally raw. And then there was the message that people would later revisit more than any other. She posted, "It seems that the average lifespan for alcohol dependency is around 50 years old. Have I already passed the halfway mark?" Just days earlier, She had still been posting normally online. She appeared in videos, interacted with followers, talked about future ideas, and in March 2026, she had even announced a brand new collaborative YouTube project alongside other creators, making it seem as though she was still actively planning for the future. From the outside, it looked like somebody continuing forward with new ideas and new projects, and that sudden contrast made the announcement hit even harder for many viewers. On April 5th and April 6th, statements appeared across her social media accounts, announcing that she had passed away unexpectedly. The statements explained that a private funeral involving close family members had already taken place. No official cause of death was publicly released. Almost immediately afterward, online discussion exploded across social media platforms. Fans flooded her accounts with emotional messages and tributes. Some described her as comforting during the worst periods of their lives. Others explained that her videos helped them feel less isolated while struggling emotionally themselves. That reaction says something important about internet culture and the way audiences emotionally connect with creators online. Modern viewers often feel far closer to internet personalities than people once felt toward traditional celebrities. People watch them daily, hear their thoughts constantly, see them drunk, lonely, exhausted, sad, happy, or emotionally overwhelmed in real time. Over time, audiences begin feeling as though they genuinely know these people personally. But stories like this reveal how limited that understanding really is. Because no matter how emotionally open somebody appears online, audiences still only see fragments of a person's real life. And sometimes those fragments hide far more than people could ever realize. Almost immediately after the announcement of Zepa's passing, speculation began spreading across social media. Many people immediately started connecting the news to the increasingly worrying posts that she had been making online during the months beforehand, particularly the posts about her alcohol dependency. Some viewers focused on the message where she questioned whether she had already reached halfway through the average lifespan associated with alcoholism. Others pointed toward posts about blacking out, drinking through the night, bruises she had shown online, and comments about feeling emotionally exhausted. Unlike a traditional celebrity death, audiences had spent years watching fragments of her private struggles unfold publicly in real time. That naturally created a feeling among viewers that they already understood what must have happened, even without official confirmation. But stories like this can also reveal the danger of parasocial relationships online. The audience may feel emotionally close to somebody, but ultimately viewers still only see fragments of a person's real life, and sometimes those fragments can create assumptions that are not fully accurate. Following the announcement, thousands of comments flooded her social media accounts from viewers describing the impact she had on their lives. One fan wrote, "She was someone you wanted to watch on the toughest days, on nights you wanted to laugh, or nights you didn't want to think at all. Zepa was there for you." Another wrote, "She joked that she'd keep uploading videos with zero content, but for us, none of it was ever zero." Others described her as comforting during periods of loneliness, depression, or emotional burnout in their own lives. Some viewers specifically mentioned her honesty surrounding alcohol struggles and emotional exhaustion, saying that her openness made them feel less isolated. One tribute simply read, "She was young, beautiful, and talented. It's truly heartbreaking." Another viewer wrote, "I still can't believe it, but I sincerely pray for your soul's eternal peace." And perhaps one of the most revealing reactions came from people who admitted they were not entirely shocked by the news itself. It would be very easy to reduce this entire story down to alcohol, internet fame, or influencer burnout alone. But the reason Zepa's story connected with so many people is because it reflected something much larger that has quietly spread across modern internet culture. A growing number of young people now feel emotionally exhausted before their adult lives have even properly started. Traditional work increasingly feels unstable, repetitive, emotionally draining, and disconnected from any real sense of meaning or identity, while at the same time, the internet constantly presents other lives that appear more exciting, more creative, more emotionally fulfilling, and more financially rewarding. And because of that, becoming an online personality no longer feels like fantasy for many people. It feels like escape. In many ways, Zepa represented that contradiction almost perfectly. She failed to enter the stable career path she originally wanted, struggled with isolation, depression, uncertainty about her future, and a growing sense that she did not really fit into the version of adulthood she thought she was supposed to pursue. Then suddenly, the internet gave her something normal that life had not. Attention, community, recognition, meaning. People genuinely cared about her. People waited for her uploads, quoted her jokes, shared her clips, and found comfort in the honesty she brought into her content. And in many ways, that emotional connection between Zepa and her audience was completely real. But modern internet culture also has a habit of slowly transforming emotional suffering into identity, especially when somebody becomes widely known for being relatable. Over time, the chaos itself starts becoming familiar to audiences. In fact, the chaos and sadness is actually expected, and therefore, in some ways, even comforting. That is one of the reasons stories like this feel so different from older celebrity tragedies, because audiences are no longer simply observing creators from a distance, the way people once observed movie stars or musicians. Instead, viewers now emotionally live alongside creators in real time. They watch streams late at night, read emotional tweets moments after they are posted, witness breakdowns as they happen, see somebody exhausted on Monday and laughing again on Tuesday, and gradually the line between entertainment and emotional dependency becomes increasingly difficult to define. At the same time, the internet rewards all of it equally. Humor, pain, confessions, and collapses all generate engagement. The algorithm does not really distinguish between somebody thriving and somebody quietly falling apart, as long as people continue watching. That does not mean audiences wanted something bad to happen to Zepa. Most clearly did not. In fact, many viewers seemed genuinely worried about her long before the announcement of her death. But concern alone does not stop the machine from grinding onwards. The videos continue, the clips spread, the algorithms keep recommending the content, and creators themselves can slowly become trapped inside the exact version of themselves that audiences respond to most strongly, especially when that version was originally built during periods of emotional instability in the first place. That is why this story feels so dread-filled in hindsight. Because when people now revisit Zepa's content, they are no longer simply watching a funny internet personality drinking strong zero late at night. They are watching somebody openly trying to cope with life in front of an audience, large enough to make leaving almost impossible. And perhaps the most unsettling part of all is this. Millions of people online probably understood her far more than they wanted to admit. Because beneath the humor, the drinking, and the chaos, Zepa represented a feeling that has spread across huge parts of modern internet culture. Well, actually, some would say it's spreading across the world in general. The feeling that normal life feels unbearable. The feeling that being constantly online feels truly unhealthy. And the feeling that somehow, despite fully understanding both of those things at the same time, people like you and me, we simply have nowhere else to go and nowhere else to turn. Thank you so much for watching. I'm uploading daily true crime and dark content here on this channel, so make sure that you're subscribed, hit like on the video, and also drop a comment so you get shown more of my stuff. Please do be careful out there, and I'll see you tomorrow.